My name is James Green. I'm a Senior Account Executive here with PolSource. Today's webinar is a Salesforce Optimization for the Semiconductor Organizations, brought to you by Salesforce and PolSource. So greatly appreciate your attendance today. We're very excited about what we're going to be presenting. Let me jump ahead into our agenda. Before I do that, a quick note on housekeeping. Obviously, we'd like to keep today's webinar as interactive as possible. So please, if you have any questions, the best place to ask those are down here on the right-hand side under Q&A, and we have time allocated during today's presentation for Q&A at the end. But please do feel free to ask those questions throughout via the Q&A tab today. Excellent. Perfect. So look at today's agenda. We're going to be taking a current look at the current state of the semiconductor industry, some of the key challenges and the disconnects, as well as diving into how PolSource is bridging the gap with some of our unique accelerators that we built over time with working with a number of semiconductor companies in the industry themselves, focusing on design registration, win opportunity management, revenue forecasting, partner communities, as well as sales analytics and predictive. I want to talk to you about supercharging your business and, of course, holding a Q&A session at the end. So let's jump in and take a look at today's panelists. As I mentioned, my name is James Green. I'm a Senior Account Executive, and I'm joined today by King O from Salesforce, as well as Trey Roldan. King, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is King O, and I'm a enterprise architect here at Salesforce. Been with Salesforce for approximately 2 years. Prior to that, I've been in the semiconductor industry, primarily in sales and marketing, for about 25 years. My latest stint was with Global Foundries, where I was managing various products as a product manager, and eventually took a role in the IT organization focused on customer engagement automations.
Great, thank you, King.
Hi everyone, my name is Trey Roldan. I lead our customer solutions group at PolSource. My role at PolSource is to help customers with solutioning applications on the Salesforce platform. Prior to PolSource, I spent about 10 years at Salesforce, where I predominantly focused on customers in the high-tech manufacturing and semiconductor space.
Great, thank you, Trey. As I mentioned, I'm James Green, Senior Account Executive based here in the Bay Area in Fremont. And I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 7 years. PolSource, at a high level, is a 15-year-old platinum partner for Salesforce. We're more of a global boutique, if you will, focusing on digital transformations. And we've done a tremendous amount of work with inside the semiconductor industry that have allowed us to create these unique accelerators that we're very excited to talk to you folks about today. So without further ado, let me jump ahead into kind of the current state of the semiconductor industry. So.
Yes.
King, feel free to take us away here.
Thank you very much. So KPMG Semiconductor Industry Confidence Index is showing a very healthy index as far as semiconductor industry. A lot of people would think that the COVID has undermined a lot of the growth in semiconductor, but actually it has accelerated a lot of that growth. And so based upon 2020 predictions, there is a high confidence, and many companies, 6 out of 10 of the industry executives, are expecting to increase capital spending in 2020. Now, there's some challenges associated with that spending. One of the challenges really associated with being able to match that R&D spending with the customers and the demand. And so there is a concern that 41% of R&D spending is not actually efficiently aligned to that. And so how do you match opportunities and the demand with your production and your manufacturing? That's one of the big areas of focus. The other area associated with this is the management of your supply chain operations. So it says 58% semiconductor companies expect changes in the operations due to the COVID and other situations, along with tariffs and being able to distribute their supply chains across the different areas of the world. How to manage these supply chains with your demand forecast is a key characteristics on being effective and being profitable. And so these are key areas that we will be touching on as far as we go into the presentation material. So one of the things that I do as an enterprise architect is to understand how organizations operate. So if you take a look at the work stream that I created, this is a blueprint of a typical customer engagement process. So up on the top, you have the new product introduction, design win process associated with a customer engagement. Then you go through a quote, design, planning process. And then obviously once those designs are designed in, you will go through the order of fulfillment. In this particular discussion, our focus on the capabilities will be focused on the partnership relationship and how to engage those partnerships, as well as the revenue planning and the configuration, pricing, and quote. Next slide. So one of the challenges associated with forecasting in semiconductors is that when you take a look at Salesforce, the forecasting methodology that Salesforce prescribes out of the box is more or less just defining an amount and close date. So it's really about design win forecasting and opportunity forecasting more so than a planning process. As you know, in semiconductors, what's critically important is to understand what is that run rate. So what is the amount of quantities that will be consumed over time? Closing a design doesn't mean that you get a consumption demand immediately. Usually those demands actually occur much further out in time. And so there is a requirement for most semiconductor companies to be able to capture this run rate and the schedule of the actual demand. And this is part of the process that we'll be discussing as to how to address that demand forecasting information. The other area is really talking about a frictionless experience with our partners. In some cases, semiconductor companies generate their revenue through their partnerships. In some companies, that can include up to 60 to 70% of the revenue, which is generated outside of their direct sales account organization. And so being able to engage these partners is a critical function. If you really think about the partners, you shouldn't think about them as an external organization. There's a lot of automation that has been developed over the course of the past decade in which you increase your productivity with your internal organizations through collaborations, through messaging, through the ability to share materials and documents. And you want to extend these capabilities to your partners so that they are part of your external workforces. So think of them as a force multiplier and not as the external party. And so the question is, how do you enable them with these capabilities? And those will be things that we touch on today as well. And Trey will go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the accelerators that PolSource has developed to facilitate some of these processes.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, King. So I'm going to hop into kind of our portfolio of accelerators and how we've typically addressed some of the common challenges or solutions that we've seen in the industry, and we're going to deep dive into a few of the areas King mentioned. But maybe just to set this up, I think there's a couple kind of consistent components that we typically encounter, and the first is really having a robust design win or design registration process within Salesforce. And I think over the years we've encountered a number of customers that haven't really had an optimal model in terms of kind of how to really model out their business process, how they sell, having the access to the historical analytics at a glance, and really just kind of having a robust process for registering new designs within their system. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The second piece is really around revenue forecasting, and King talked a lot about this. And I think a couple things really come to mind when it comes to forecasting revenue in Salesforce. I think a lot of the customers that we talk to, commonly bring up the fact that, hey, we understand that Salesforce supports forecasting, but out of the box, it's really not what we're looking for. And we're going to talk about giving customers access to things like an Excel-like experience within Salesforce to enter a forecast. As well as kind of having that visibility to your historical analytics to really inform the forecast and ensure that what's planned up front is really what's going to materialize when it comes to the actuals. And then finally, we're seeing more and more customers looking to add complex configuration, pricing, and quoting capabilities. And this is another area where we bring forward a lot of patterns when it comes to, how to address CPQ in Salesforce. And, some of the common themes that we see are, when our customers are looking to get to a, final bill of materials and to really kind of see what the, final costs are on a given, opportunity. there are other kind of aspects that need to be considered, things like rebates or things like, other kind of agreed contract prices that they have with their, either distributors or their customers. So, these are other areas that I think, we've commonly seen, and I think these are the key components of, most of the sales focused implementations that we do. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with, just kind of a lens on design registration. And, I think most customers are going to have their own process for how they approach these. But I think the key is that we have a blueprint for how we commonly, address these types of needs. And, it all really starts with having a sales process that's effectively modeled out within the Sales Cloud. And, having the ability to seamlessly have visibility on, all of your deals up front, having a very robust approval process that can drive, your flow, and then being able to tie this to some of the key aspects that we talked about earlier around, quotes and order form generation. Really starts with kind of having a robust process that's modeled within that opportunity management feature within Salesforce. From a component perspective, we see a lot of customers that are, looking to model out across multiple business units. So, we work with customers that, support various BUs, whether it's, things like more traditional desktop or server or, IoT, and having a way to really represent a complex product hierarchy within Salesforce, and making this easy from a user perspective, to quote, to price, to be able to really kind of have seamless access to that product catalog, and most importantly, tying this to your downstream ERP. So being able to have your ERP populating some of these things like product master. And then just from a entry perspective, going through kind of the process of quoting, of providing quantities, of providing various other indicators as deals are put together. These are kind of the key components that we typically see when it comes to modeling out these processes. So let's move to the next slide, and I think this is kind of putting it all together from design registration to revenue forecasting. And I think there's really no I guess single approach to how revenue is forecasted. We have some customers that forecast on an opportunity basis. We have customers that forecast by account. So a lot of variation. But I think what we want to show you is probably one of the more complex examples of how forecasting can be done from a revenue perspective in Salesforce. And what we're looking at here is really an opportunity that's essentially associated with a customer. We have multiple products that are tied to that customer, and what we typically look at is what's kind of the total lifespan of an opportunity. Typically for most designs, these are going to span over multiple years, and what we'd be looking to essentially collect here is data on a quarterly basis on or a weekly or a monthly on kind of what's the expected quantities that we expect to sell for this given product or design. What are the volumes, the average selling prices? We roll that up from a total dollar perspective, and we're able to basically keep that in sync in the grid that you see below with the opportunity. So what this allows us to do is really get much more granular with how we're forecasting revenue against our opportunities. The other thing I would mention here is when you're capturing orders directly within the system via CPQ, Salesforce CPQ, which allows you to do the order generation, tying those actuals to a forecast can be very useful. So, having the ability to, directly input actuals into the forecast is another consideration. And I think that's the true benefit of having this data in Salesforce, because we find typically so many of our customers are typically driving this process outside of Salesforce for their, office of the CFO. So, this was kind of the key example that we wanted to provide around, a more complex view of revenue forecasting custom within Salesforce, providing that Excel grid-like experience. I didn't touch on it, but everything that we see here can be validated. So, ensuring that if there's a roll-up that has to be enforced, if there are, data values that have to be validated, we're doing all of that real time. And we're not asking the user to save as they're inputting this forecast to ensure that they really have a user-friendly, seamless experience. So James, let's move to the next screen. So we looked at a view on what an opportunity-based forecast looks like, and I think we wanted to provide an alternative view based on an account-based forecast. And this could be viewed at an account-based, at a BU basis, but really very similar approach here. I think what we wanted to really emphasize is the power of having this process consolidated in Salesforce is bringing forward things like analytics in this planning view. And this is a great example of you can see there's an Excel-like entry experience at the bottom. It's all grid entry. We have a great lightning component that we leverage to drive this for our customers. But most importantly, having the historical analytics and the historical actuals to inform the forecast. This is absolutely critical, and I think what we find is oftentimes when you're forecasting for on a quarterly basis, you want to know what did we sell last quarter for the same product group, what did we sell last year for the same period. So having some of those statistics at hand again to really kind of inform an accurate forecast are absolutely critical. And the last thing that I would say here is it's not uncommon that these processes typically feed a lot of downstream systems, right? So we're gonna provide the inputs which are going to typically be collected from our sales teams, and we're going to drive those downstream to our demand systems, to our systems that really are tracking manufacturing forecasting and really kind of driving that MRP process. And then, in terms of partner interaction and PRM, partner relationship management, I think this is an area that we're really most excited about, and I think we're seeing customers really benefiting from the ability to use a robust partner relationship management system, specifically Salesforce partner communities, to really drive better collaboration with their suppliers, with their key channel partners, and really ensuring that a number of features can be brought to bear upfront through these communities. So everything we looked at from the internal view in terms of allowing your internal sales users to manage their registrations can all be done on the partner side as well. So allowing your partners to directly register designs, allowing your partners to quote directly from a community, register leads. And I think where we really see the other potential use cases around this are a lot of the communication that goes on today around supplier demand, supplier inventory, supplier stock. Having some of that data available from a community perspective for suppliers to register the data is absolutely key, because a lot of what we see today, those activities are happening via email, they're happening via spreadsheets, phone calls, and a lot of that effort is really landing on the desks of the various semiconductor organizations. And I think having that in the hands of partners and the channel can certainly help add additional scale. All right, from a analytics perspective, really want to hit on kind of some of the key trends we're seeing around analytics. And, Einstein Analytics, or Tableau for CRM, as we're now calling it, has really been kind of critical in driving some of that, not just from a, visibility perspective, but also from a predictive perspective. And I think when we look at, kind of the first example here, total addressable market. So really understanding, for various OEMs, which are competitive designs, seeing kind of what the market share looks like, for a given slot, seeing where, a given manufacturer has an advantage over their competitors, and really having that data can really drive critical results when it comes to planning from a selling perspective. And I think this is an area that really some of our most effective, highest performing customers are really laser focused on, for really understanding kind of the competitive TAM. We looked at revenue forecasting, but again, tying together the forecast to the grid. This is absolutely something that can only improve the accuracy of the forecast. And then the last one that I'll spend a little bit more time on is just around analytics and predictive. And I think King mentioned a couple of key points up front. Around things like tariffs. One of the other common things we see is around cost of materials. We know that pricing is never static, within this industry, and I think having better predictive capabilities on where prices are going to be, whether it's from a material perspective or from a component or design perspective. This is really an area that Tableau for CRM can really help drive and really inform. And I think there's two key use cases here. I think absolutely from a planner perspective, having visibility to this data is key. But I also think from a selling perspective, as these deals are being put together, having this data at hand as part of the configuration process can also be critical. So the right data at the right time. All right, we can move to next slide here. All right, so that's what we had for today, but we'd be more than happy to open it up for some Q&A.
Perfect. Well, Trey and King, thank you greatly for walking us through all that fantastic information. We do have a first question, Trey, that had come through. You had mentioned integration into ERP and manufacturing systems. Can you kind of speak to what that looks like from your perspective and past clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we see a broad variety of ERPs when it comes to, how we integrate with Salesforce. SAP tends to be a common one. Oracle, we see Bond. So a lot of various platforms, from a integration perspective. We've been very fortunate to work with a number of customers that have adopted MuleSoft, and MuleSoft has been a key component to a lot of the transformational journeys that we've worked with our customers on. So really kind of tying a bus event-driven architecture to the data has been a pretty common pattern that we've been observing.
Other question that we have here is, obviously we've shown off our accelerators. Is there a cost associated to these when we work with our customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've essentially built a library of accelerators, and those are accelerators that we bring to bear on any of our project implementations. There is no cost to the accelerators. You can think of it as a blueprint. You can think of it as if there is a desire to have things like an Excel-like entry. We've seen a variety of different use cases. Some of the semiconductors that we work with are IP-based, for example. So grid entry is extremely important when it comes to things like royalty tables and really kind of forecasting payment milestones when it comes to their contracting processes. So from a cost perspective, there is no cost to these. It's something that we bring to bear to accelerate the pace of our implementations.
Excellent, thank you. Another question we have here is, obviously, I think you touched upon this at the beginning of the presentation. If there's a semiconductor company that is looking to make these levels of change, where would you say the best place for them to start would be to begin sort of adopting these accelerators that we've laid out?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I think I'll give my perspective, and then King, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I think we work with customers that are at all different ends of the journey when it comes to kind of transforming how they go to market and how they sell. I think we've seen a number of customers that are looking to move off of legacy technology that certainly doesn't have the same agility as Salesforce, and isn't kind of adapting to the level of change that we're seeing in the industry. But I would say typically the starting point tends to be with the foundation of modeling out the sales process, modeling out the the design process, and then typically the secondary piece is going to be service, right? And giving the service organizations better visibility into what's happening on the field from a selling perspective. And I think that's commonly a gap, and it commonly presents customer experience challenges, right, when service and sales are disconnected. But King, I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I think most semiconductor organizations, at least the ones that I have dealt with, have over time create very efficient capabilities, but they're oftentimes siloed. So for example, sales and managing opportunities, they develop practices that are really good at managing opportunities, but then you go into the planning process, or you go into the service processes. And so what I like to do when I talk to customers about their organizations and their processes is about doing a top level assessment. What are the workflows and engagement that you want to do and achieve from end to end? How do you get from a customer engagement, from a lead, all the way to revenue, and map that out and do an honest assessment of the individual points in that process? For example, the marketing to lead transfer. When marketing transfers a lead to the sales, is that working pretty well? Are you getting good conversion rates? And just walk down those processes and find out what your breakpoints are. And those will be the areas that you identify that you want to focus on. And it could be in sales, could be in marketing, it could be in service, it could be getting order data into the hands of salespeople. And then once you understand that, then you know where to prioritize.
King, this is a question for you. From the terms of the Salesforce lens, are you seeing any trends around products or anything in particular around the semiconductor vertical market that you're seeing?
Yeah, so we are starting to put a lot of focus on the high tech space. I would say this areas that you're talking about as far as forecasting and the channel management are two of the key areas that Salesforce is focused on. Historically, Salesforce has been a tool that was designed just for the sales organization. I mean, our name talks about Salesforce and the CRM process, but what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of activities that happens in semiconductors because the engagement is so deep. It's not necessarily that you engage your customers with just a sales team. I mean, you have your salesperson, you have your FAEs, you have your CSRs, you have engineering development teams. All these people need to be able to collaborate and engage with that customer in a platform that supports all those activities. And so from a Salesforce perspective, we're looking beyond just the sales organizations, but how to extend capabilities to partners, to planners, to quality organizations, engineering organizations on a single platform where you can get some of that insight, where you can understand how those conversion rates are being optimized and manage those workflows. So yes, we are definitely focused in that area to extend the capabilities to those organizations beyond just a salesperson.
Gotcha. Another follow-on question is, how are customers offering engineering support into the field today? Do you have any perspective on that?
Well, a lot of companies, unfortunately, are doing it by email. And that's what I see traditionally, is that the engagement between customers, engineering, and the internal engineering organizations, they're sending files by emails, or they have a FTP servers where they drop files, and none of that information is actually recorded. None of those activities are actually tracked. So a lot of times there'll be issues or questions that a customer may have, and they can't get resolutions because they're not using a case management tool. Sometimes what I hear customers are asking the same questions over and over. For example, one account that I'm working on, they mentioned that one of the biggest requests that comes in through email from the customer is, what is my price for this one particular product? And they get that question 4 or 5 times a week. And you would think that they would have access to that information. So this is where you can have a community site for the customers where you can post that information, and becomes more of a self-service model. So you can streamline your operations across the board, whether it's engineering, customer service, or just any type of regular support, by having that communities built up, tied to your Salesforce platform, and you're managing the customers, not just internally, but externally as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, King. And just maybe to layer on top of that really quickly, I think we're seeing a lot of demand right now for that deflection capability that you just described, and really centralizing things like knowledge bases, some of these articles from an engineering perspective, some of the recurring questions that are asked, and driving kind of world-class support organizations. Certainly can start at the community level, and I think we've seen a lot of organizations have extreme success with modeling out a deflection model. And then I think the other thing that we've seen, and it's not relevant to all customers, but certainly for customers that are more on the tooling or on the equipment side of things, we're seeing demand for field service solutions, so solutions that can really allow engineers to go out on the field, leveraging Salesforce's field service management suite to really kind of drive visibility on in the field challenges, and we've done a lot of investment on our side at PolSource to not only kind of drive some of the the considerations around support from the field, but also for upsell when it comes to parts in the field. So that's another piece in terms of tying together holistically quoting as well as a service.
Excellent. Let me double check, see if we have any more questions here. No, I think we've answered all of them. So let me just sort of jump ahead and see what, excuse me one second, see what we have here. King, did you want to address the semiconductor enterprise architecture capability cards?
Absolutely. So one things that when I work with customers to understand what are their capabilities and how mature as far as their business processes are, they have a lot of questions of what does the best practice look like? And so what Salesforce has done is they created these capability cards. And you mentioned before, how committed is Salesforce to the semiconductor industry, for example. We actually create a set of cards that are specific for semiconductors in addition to our core capability cards. So you can go to that website over there. It's a pretty document where you can zoom in and zoom out of the different capabilities and do some self-assessment of your organizations and your capabilities to find out, are there gaps in your current operations? And this is a self-reflection perspective, in that a lot of times you get stuck in a rut doing the same thing on a continual basis. It does take some thought to take a step back and say, are we doing things properly? Could we have continuous improvement in our business processes? And this is a quick way for you to start that assessment process.
Great, thank you, King. Perfect. Well, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. As an action item from the PolSource side, I'll be following up with all of the attendees to see if you'd like to have further conversations about the topics that we've addressed, as well as our accelerators, and if they might be a good fit for your semiconductor business. Again, my name is James Green. I'm with PolSource. I'd like to thank King O from Salesforce, as well as Trey Roldan from PolSource for today's webinar, as well as all the external help that we received from inside of Salesforce and PolSource as well. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope everybody has a great Veterans Day. Thanks again for your time. And we'll be putting up a copy and recording of today's webinar on the Salesforce site as well as on PolSource as well. So thank you greatly for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at hello@polsource.com. Thanks so much, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.